Hey guys, welcome to my video for UFC 283 Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3. I'm going over some of the fights on this card for picks and bets and that kind of stuff. Not every single fight because frankly I'm just not that comfortable with every single one. It's just the ones that I feel confident about. Anyway, I haven't been uploading. I haven't uploaded anything actually in the first quarter of this year. Honestly, the whole James Krause bullshit with UFC or MMA. Or I think I don't know if it was MMA or UFC gambling, but there was a ban on it in Ontario, and that just I don't know. That sort of turned me off of the whole thing. I just didn't really feel like making the videos, and also just like the really shitty quality of cards that have been churned out this year. Nothing really stands out as notable. Like there may have been a few good fights, but they're honestly mostly all just they're mostly all shadowed by the utter shittiness in the quality of each and every single card that's come out this year so far. Including this one too, it just all feels very slapped together, but you know, whatever. These are my picks. Alright, so the first fight is going to be Ľudovít Klein versus Herbert. I think this is in accordance to how the fights will appear on the card, in terms of the list and everything. I'm just looking at topology and going from bottom to top, but anyway, for this fight, I'm going to be picking Ľudovít Klein to win. So I don't know whether this is going to be a finish or a distance, but I am very comfortable in betting the overs here, at least the 1.5 rounds, over 1.5 rounds. Herbert isn't a bad fighter, but I think he's yet another prospect that's been ruined by the UFC. I think he was pretty competent outside of the UFC, but after getting in, he's been faced with straight killers, and I think they may have broken his chin. All of his wins inside the UFC has been against guys who are on losing streaks, and he's also developed a bit of a win-loss record, which personally I find to be pretty reliable. And his last fight was a win, so this one should be a loss. Anyway, I think he would have had it better if he was faced with opponents that were more on his level. Like, it would have been a good way for him to grow his talents, but we all know that the UFC doesn't play like that. Klein had a good record coming into the UFC, and it seems like he's a very technical fighter. I remember seeing him have good ground game in a fight. I don't remember which one. He also has pretty good stand-up too. Klein's record pre-UFC was him getting wins over good opponents who had double-digit wins, while Herbert's opponents were guys who had like less than 10 fights in total. Herbert is technical, but he doesn't really put pressure on his opponents. I think he fights a bit recklessly, and he gets caught a lot against the seasoned strikers that he gets put up against. Klein can crumble under pressure, but I don't think Herbert's the type to pressure any opponent that he's up against. Herbert has range, but I think Klein's ground game will probably win the fight over here. So the next fight that I've picked out is Christian Leroy Duncan versus Dusko Todorovic. Duncan's making his debut in the UFC here on this card against someone who I think is an appropriate and winnable opponent in Dusko Todorovic. I think Duncan will probably win by finish here. I would also bet the unders for this fight, as I don't think this one is going to go the distance. Dusko isn't a bad fighter, but he's not the most skillful. However, he always puts on pretty good performances in his fights. I would even go as far as saying that this is the kind of fighter that the UFC would really benefit off of having in more of their unranked sections across any division, really. He may not be skilled, but he's always going for the finish. All of his wins and losses for that matter have come from finishes. He also has a very reliable win-loss record, with his last one being a win. I'd like to mention that in all of his wins, that all of his wins are over guys who have since been cut from the UFC, and they were also on pretty bad losing streaks at the time of fighting him. Anyway, Duncan has had a very long amateur career, and he took on guys who had good, credible records. In his pro career before the UFC, he had a 7-0 streak in Cage Warriors, which is the same one that Justin Gaethje came from. Anyway, as well as fighting opponents who are on par, like on his level. To me, I'd say that Duncan is a bit like Klein, someone who has a lot of proficiency on the ground, but is also a very clean striker. Duncan can get a good knockout, and I think Dusko's shin might be a bit damaged to getting knocked out so much. I'll just say that I can also see a first round finish happening here in favor of Duncan. My next pick is for Lerone Murphy versus Gabriel Santos. Right off the bat, I should tell you that this is a pick that I'm not very confident about, but the only pick that I do feel confident about regarding this fight is that it will not go the distance. If you want, you could also bet on the unders in this fight, but again, this can end in any of the 3 rounds, and I feel these guys are similarly skilled to each other, that they can adequately counter each other in what each other can do. Anyway, if I had to, I'd give the slight edge to Lerone Murphy simply because he has fought good UFC competition in his tenure so far. But with that said, Santos is also a brawler who's good on both the feet and the ground. I should also mention that this is not only Santos' debut in the UFC, but he's also taking this fight on short notice against someone who's pretty competent, and albeit in the unranked part of the division, in an already pretty competitive division. Okay, so the next fight I have picked is Sam Patterson versus Yanal Ashmov. This fight is actually pretty funny to me, not because of the state of the fighters or anything like that, but just because how this fight kind of exposes the UFC and how they slap together their events consistently. This is a fight between two absolute newcomers who I'm sure that the fans of the UFC is trying to cater to have no idea about. This is a typical UFC bump fight in a special numbered event that gets a slot that's pretty close to the main card, but you know, it is what it is. Anyway, I think this is a fight that'll probably cater to the fans in the arena, which means the English fans. Anyway, I think Patterson is a far more skilled opponent and has faced a much higher level of competition than Ashmov has. Ashmov is 6-0, which is not a bad record or anything, but he's fought mostly like local guys whose records don't even add up to 10 fights in total. He has good striking, but I don't imagine it's hard to look good against local bums. Patterson's pre-UFC fight record looks not bad. He has a very diverse background and competition. It looks like he's been fighting guys from all over with different styles and different winning methods. His opponents seem to have good records also. I just also want to mention that Ashmov is 5'9", while Patterson is 6'3", and this fight is taking place at 155, which is the lightweight division. Anyway, I think Patterson will probably win by finish here. I'm not saying first round KO, but I think the finish will most likely come in either the second or the third round. Alright, so my next pick is for Chris Duncan versus Omar Morales. This is the second Chris Duncan we have on this card, no middle name this time. Anyway, this is a pretty good prelim fight, but I also don't know why this is so far up on the card, much like the previous one. Anyway, this is Duncan's debut after a win in the Contender Series, and he's going up against someone who's become a bit of a UFC prelim mainstay. Anyway, Duncan's record looks good. He's fought guys who are mostly on the same level as him, and not guys who are much worse off, which to me shows that he's actually like making an effort to become better rather than just coasting. Morales' pre-UFC record is nothing to look twice at. Like, he's fought mostly newcomers who have less than 5 fights. He's been in the UFC for a while. 5 or 6 fights, I think. He has some UFC experience, sure, but also consider that the only fights that he's won in the UFC are against guys who are in losing streaks. He seems to crumble when facing anybody like half decent. You should also mention that this fight is at 155, and Duncan is 29 years old making his debut, while Morales is 37 years old fighting at 155 pounds. Anyway, I think this fight will go the distance, and the overs seem like a pretty good bet for this fight. Okay, so my last pick for this card will be for Jack Shore versus Makwan Amirkhani. And I'm pretty sure that I don't even have to talk about this fight, but I will anyway. I'm sure anybody who's been watching UFC for a little bit of time is well aware of the classic Amirkhani fight by now. I can already tell what's going to happen here. So what I think is going to happen is the fight will start off pretty competitively with lots of slick and heavy movements. Shore's going to do his thing, but Makwan will look like the busier, more active, and more seasoned fighter. He's going to put the pressure on Shore. There's going to be a decent amount of striking, but what we're going to see the most of is Amirkhani grappling and wrestling the shit out of Shore. Or at least he's going to try to. He's going to try to get the sub on Shore throughout the whole first round. It's going to look very competitive, and there's a very good chance that Makwan will probably win the first round, but that's all he's going to win. As round 2 starts, he's going to try the same shit again, but as the round progresses, he's going to become slower and slower until he can barely move or even throw a punch. He's going to end up gassing, and Shore will then get the finish on him. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be a tune-up fight for Jack Shore. He did lose his last one to one of the best grapplers in the division in Ricky Simone, but he was undefeated before that, and I think what he wants is to be seen as someone who has the same invincibility of with an undefeated record. So I'm pretty sure he's going to go hard in this fight to make a statement. With that said, though, Makwan by finish or sub in the first round is an absolute live dog meme bet, as it is for every single one of his fights. Okay, so that wraps up my picks for UFC 286. 15 fights in total, and I picked 6, which I don't think is a bad number. There were like 1 or 2 other fights I wanted to talk about, but didn't really have much to say on, like Muhammad Mokaev versus Jafel Filio. I hope I said that right. I know Mokaev has had an injury recently, and Filio is coming off. I believe he's a late replacement, taking this fight on short notice, but he does seem pretty proficient on the ground, where Mokaev is also proficient. So, given Mokaev has an injury, I feel like Filio would be a good meme bet. Don't bet too much on him because I'm not too sure about him. And there's also Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. I think Fiziev will win because I've seen from both of their fights, I feel like Gaethje's more of a brawler, while Fiziev is he has heavy hands, but he's more technical. Like his movements are more thought out, if that makes any sense. Marvin Vettori versus Roman Dolidze seems like an interesting fight. I also think Dolidze will probably win this one because I feel like he switches it up quite a bit. Like he can stand up and he can grapple, whereas Marvin Vettori's technique is to just mostly hug your opponent, lay and pray for 3 to 5 rounds. Yeah, that'll be it. So I didn't really check the odds for any of the fights before making these picks, but I can already tell that all the fighters that I picked to win are heavy favorites, which, you know, it follows a trend with all these international cards that the UFC has been doing, like for France and the other time they went to England. Like, it's pretty much, hey, look at your local talent beat a bum, and that's pretty much it. That's what it was for France. That's what it was for the previous English card, and honestly, that's what it looks like that's what it looks like is going to happen on this card as well. But, you know, whatever. Hopefully, I'll be in the mood to make a video for next week, and yeah, have fun.